Hey everybody, I'm Seajay, and I'm glad you're all here to see the official unveiling of my final evolutions for my starter Pokemon. A quick prefix to this video, I'm having to re-record the audio, and so you may find that in this version of the audio, there's more mistakes and more stumbles or stutters than normal. I'm just too tired to do this for a whole nother hour, so I'm going to give it my best shot, and hopefully not have to re-record for as many mistakes, but either way, I'm excited to show you how Leavillain, Ignetoad, and Grumpish have evolved respectively. For those who have watched the previous Wentano videos, you may remember that I hinted at some pretty large changes that would take place when these Pokemon evolved. I even let it slip that none of these Pokemon would retain their secondary types of fighting, rock, and ground respectively. So do you think you've figured out the evolutionary trajectory of each of these Pokemon? Let's find out. Today we're going to start with what becomes of little Ignetoad. If you'll remember back to Ignetoad's video, this Pokemon has a body composed of hot magma and seeks out volcanic rocks to eat. As it eats and absorbs these rocks, it then uses the warts on its body to create and launch obsidian spikes. When Ignetoad doesn't consume enough lava rock, it can no longer produce this defense mechanism. The question becomes very quickly, how do you evolve that concept? One thing that I wanted to really push myself with this project was to avoid doing evolutions that could be classified as the same but bigger. I didn't want to have Ignetoad's or really any of my Pokemon's evolutions just be a larger version of itself. To me, the clear path was to continue pushing deeper, specifically deeper into the volcano. Magnet and Ignetoad live in lava tubes below the large mountains of the Wentano region. As these Pokemon prepare to evolve, their hunger for rocks, specifically lava rocks, intensifies, pushing them deeper into these volcanic labyrinths. One thing that becomes very interesting about lava tubes is that they become nesting grounds for gemstones. More specifically, it's that at great depths and pressures, many different kinds of gemstones can be formed underneath volcanoes. This became, in my mind, the perfect path for Ignetoad to take to evolution. As its hunger pushes it deeper into the volcanic tubes that it lives in, it encounters food constructed in such a way that its body begins to produce gemstones instead of obsidian spikes. With a body that is essentially a pressure cooker, its liquid rock surface becomes more rippled and disturbed, often overflowing and covering its warts entirely. Still, the organs still produce crystals, and the defense mechanism is ever present, ready to launch at any time. One thing that I really love about modern starter trios is that the final evolutions often have specific themes that feel related to each other. Scarlet and Violet's final trio are all entertainers, a singer, a dancer, and a magician. The Kalos starter Pokemon are all supposed to be RPG classes. Very cool. The theming that I decided to apply to my starter trio is a little more vague, but it helped me form them into something really interesting. They're supposed to represent three major types of combat, being ranged combat, edged weapons combat, and unarmed combat. Ignetoad's evolution represents this ranged combat fighting style, which led it to have the gemstone cannons mounted to its shoulders that you see here. I want to be very clear that this is in no way supposed to be similar to Blastoise. These cannons work more like a mortar, where the gemstones are launched high into the air and descend upon unsuspecting victims. They launch incredibly high and incredibly far, as they literally erupt from this Pokemon's shoulders. Now, I bet you're wondering, what type will this Pokemon be assigned? Gemstones are still rocks, so shouldn't it still be a rock type? And while you could definitely make that argument, I think that with the exception of Sableye, many gemstone Pokemon are fairy types. Diancie and Xerneas are both great examples, though I will admit that Diancie is also a rock type, but still. To me, this typing is intended to be reflective of the essentially magical ability to create gemstones within this Pokemon's body. I also imagine that as it lives deep in the heart of a volcano, it may not always need a defense mechanism, so maybe it becomes quite vain and produces these gemstones to decorate its den with. Anyways, meet Toadaimar, the diamond toad Pokemon. Toadaimar are incredibly rare and difficult to find in the wild. They reside only in the deepest caverns below Wentano volcanoes, where they create beautiful crystalline dens. They are known to have quite the appetite and eat 100 pounds of volcanic rock daily in order to continue producing the beautiful gemstones that protrude from their bodies. They often love to look at their own reflection, admiring the beauty of the crystals lining their backs and shoulders. Next, let's talk about what has become of Leavillain. For this Pokemon's next evolution, I really wanted to progress the story that had taken place when it evolved from a Seedle. Only when this Pokemon was filled with anger, hatred, and resentment could it evolve into Leavillain. I imagine that after this evolution takes place, it takes advantage of its increased size, speed, and strength to beat up on the other Pokemon around it. It would also go on to be quite the aggressive attacker, earning it the fighting type. There are two major ways in which Leavillain develops before it evolves. Just like Seedle before it, in order to evolve, Leavillain must experience a massive personality shift. At some point, and this would be different for all Leavillain, this Pokemon realizes that the revenge it seeks to enact on the forest is dissatisfying. Not only that, but it also begins to develop compassion for the other small and often young Pokemon that it had been attacking. No longer is the mentality, I had to suffer and so should you, but instead Leavillain becomes to feel that maybe other Pokemon shouldn't have to suffer as it did, and that to some extent its own suffering was a product of its own fear and cowardice as a Seedle. Now, understanding that its eyes and senses had deceived it, and that most, if not all, of the forest had done nothing to deserve the treatment that Leavillain had enacted on them, Leavillain takes a vow of blindness. It discards its sight willingly, vowing to keep its eyes closed for the remainder of its life as a sign of this change of heart. In doing this, it opens itself up to a whole new world of perception. Though difficult at first, some level of primal intuition as a grass type begins to tap Leavillain into the natural world around it. As this takes place, so does Leavillain's evolution. With its eyes still closed, it develops large leaf-shaped antennae that help it better perceive the world around it. On top of that, a third eye, or rather third leaf, forms and floats in the center of its now impressive horn. This is also the birth of its psychic abilities. Now able to perceive the world around it physically, this Pokemon can easily defeat foes in physical combat. Where before it had relied on its vision and excellent fighting skills, now it can literally read its opponent's every moves psychically to counteract and dodge them. The only way to defeat this Pokemon is to be faster and to think faster than it. Once evolved, these Pokemon are often protectors of the forest in which they reside, ensuring that all Pokemon are able to live the peaceful lives that they want, without the fear of having to hide. Should a Leavillain arise, this Pokemon works to rehabilitate them and show them the error of their ways. This Pokemon's inspirations are mostly the monk archetype, a warrior poet maybe. That's the kind of role that I want this Pokemon to transition into as it evolves, not just an evolution of the physical form, but the mental as well. And it still retains the physical prowess of a Leavillain, representing the hand-to-hand or unarmed combat. That's enough of me waxing poetic though. Let's talk more about the evolution itself. You'll notice that its beetle's shell has returned. I wanted this to come back as now this Pokemon is a bit more of a practical fighter and recognizes the value of a shell that it had once discarded. On top of that, it still has leaf-like elements to maintain its mimicry theme. That being said, they are somewhat diminished compared to the previous evolutions, as this Pokemon isn't just mimicking the forest anymore, it has become one with it. And we've got extra arms. Additionally, I felt like the bug fuzz beard was a good element to demonstrate the wisdom that this Pokemon had obtained. Plus, we don't have much fuzzy bug representation in Pokemon, so it felt fitting. Another fun detail, within each antenna and the third eye or third leaf, you'll notice a distinct yellowish marking inside to help give it more of an eye symbolism. Meet Unicles, the enlightened beetle Pokemon. Now disturbed by its actions as a Leavillain and convinced of the error of its ways, Unicles has taken a vow of blindness. No longer trusting their visual perception of the world around them, they develop intense psychic abilities when they evolve, and use their antennae and third eye to predict their opponent's movements. Still a capable fighter, the only way to beat a Unicles is to think faster than it. That brings us back to the Pokemon that started this all. If you'll remember, I decided to get back into my Fakemon passions after drawing a tripod fish at work that looked like it could maybe be a Pokemon. That drawing became the basis for Trippish, who then evolved into Grumpish. We went from a tripod fish who could walk on land for short periods of time to a mud skipper who was essentially semi-aquatic. Evolving this concept another time took me some time. I wanted to make sure that again I wasn't just doing a mud skipper but bigger, or relying too much on one idea. Then it struck me, what would be the ultimate departure from living in the sea, especially as a fish? It's not the land, but the sky. I absolutely loved the concept of a fish that left the water to walk on land, started jumping large distances when it evolved, and eventually developed specialized wings that it could use to fly. Thus, I began to look at how to transition Grumpish into some combination of a flying fish and a sailfish. Here's the gist of it. Flying fish actually can't fly, but they can do something else that is equally as incredible. They can wiggle their little fishtails so fast that they create lift using their specialized wings and can glide distances of 650 feet or 200 meters. Insane. Still, it's only gliding after that initial takeoff, but incredible. Sailfish, on the other hand, and other similar sport fish, are some of the fastest fish in the ocean. Sailfish, in particular, reach speeds of 68 miles per hour. Incredible. Plus, they have that spiky nose that really ties it into the other Pokemon that this Pokemon has evolved from. Here's what I imagine. Just like Trippish had to push itself physically to evolve into Grumpish, a fish more capable on land, Grumpish too eventually becomes dissatisfied with its abilities and pushes itself physically once more. Wanting to be faster, it strives to leap higher and higher into the air. As it does so, this determination to break free from its earthly chains gives it the strength it needs to evolve. Now an ATF, or all-terrain fish, this third stage Pokemon retains the spines needed to walk on land, and it gains an agile body capable of swimming at high speeds in the water. Alternatively, its fins are now specialized wings that allow it to take to the sky. This Pokemon is the ultimate competitor, constantly pushing itself to greater heights and ability. Soon, it would discover sword fighting, or rather sword nose fighting. It pushes itself in this respect too. Recognizing that its sharp fins and pointed nose are quite dangerous tools, these Pokemon often engage each other in duels across land, sea, and air. They will even engage with and seek out other fearsome Pokemon with which to duel and continue pushing themselves. This Pokemon is intended to represent armed, or at least edged weapons combat amongst the starter trio, which makes the Sailfish the perfect inspiration, like we talked about with that pointy nose. If you haven't guessed it yet either, this Pokemon will have the secondary typing of flying. To me, it felt most thematically fitting. With a Pokemon so focused on improving the self and being the best, I like the idea that it literally reaches for the sky and makes that happen. I know that we talked about how flying fish really only glide, but hey, it's a Pokemon, right? We can get away with bending some of the rules of the physical world. Plus, flying fish are cool. Anyways, meet Aerialish, the sky fish Pokemon. Aerialish are fiercely competitive and often attract trainers with similar natures. Able to fight battles on land, in the sea, and in the sky, these Pokemon will seek out the toughest opponents in order to test their mettle and improve their strength. Their nose and fin spines are incredibly sharp, and have even been known to slice through solid rock on multiple occasions. And there you have it, 3 fully fleshed out starter Pokemon. A toad whose growing hunger causes it to grow massive and produce illustrious crystals. A beetle who enacts revenge on society only to realize the error of its ways. A fish who pushes itself to its limits only to be rewarded with the ability to fly. I am incredibly happy with the thematic and narrative concepts that I used to push these designs further. I think that if we look back at my previous starters from like a year and a half ago, these 3 are a massive improvement and closer to the idea of what a Pokemon truly is and should be. This video is running a little longer than I wanted it to. I just got so excited about these 3 concepts. That being said, I do want to give you a hint as to what's coming and how the rest of the Wentano Region videos are going to be formatted. This is a map of Wentano, and you're going to start right here in Coralport, your hometown. What will happen from there? Only time will tell, but I can assure you that the Pokemon, people, and legends you meet along the way will make for one heck of a story. Until then, thank you for watching. Let me know what starter you're going to pick, and also, go make some Pokemon of your own. Thank you.